Healthcare runs on thousands of decisions made every day: clinical, operational, and financial. Revenue cycle management is where those decisions meet reality and where precision, context, and accountability matter most. Smarter Technologies brings clinical intelligence, AI, and human oversight together in one coordinated platform, helping health systems document, code, and capture their work accurately, compliantly, and at scale. Because when teams can trust their technology, they can move healthcare forward. Learn more at smartertech.com.
Welcome to the Heart of Healthcare podcast. I'm Halle Tecco.
I'm Michael Esquivel.
And I'm Steve Krause. And every Monday, we bring you the latest in healthcare innovation as we sit down with entrepreneurs and industry experts.
So buckle up and join us as we figure out how to improve healthcare for all. Hello, listeners, and welcome back to the show. I'm Halle Tecco, and I'm here with my co-host, Michael Esquivel, to bring you the top headlines for the last month in digital health. Michael, hi. How are you?
I'm doing great, Halle. Excited to tackle these terrific articles. What an interesting first couple of months of 2026, and excited to dive in. But it's great to see you. It was so wonderful to be able to record in person together.
We have an episode coming up to share where we did the listener Q&A. I think folks are going to like that. Today, we have our also always very popular digital health download. And while we are not biotech experts, this month's stories, they are all skewing on the biotech pharma side because there's just so much happening there. Should I kick us off?
Yeah, Halle, let's get going.
All right. So last month, we saw a record number of digital health ads during the Super Bowl. I was watching just the ads in the halftime show, not the actual game. But most of the ads were from these virtual prescribing platforms, Hims and Rows, and pharmaceutical companies. And I think this is a testament to just how far we've come in the consumerization of healthcare and how eager these companies are to reach us. But it all brings up a very good question. Should drug companies be allowed to advertise to us at all? There are only 2 countries in the world that allow direct-to-consumer pharma advertising, us and New Zealand. And when I was in my MPH program, I did a meta-analysis on this exact question. And the research is very clear that advertising for drugs changes behavior. Patients request specific drugs, physicians prescribe them more often, utilization increases. The harder question to answer is whether health outcomes improve in proportion to that increased use. So a 2023 study in JAMA found that nearly 3/4 of the most heavily advertised drugs did not offer meaningfully added benefit over older alternatives. So critics are arguing that advertising drives demand for high-cost brand name drugs, particularly among older adults who already take more medications and are frequent targets of these ads.
Crazy, Halle. I mean, it felt like it was Pharma Bowl complimenting the Super Bowl for sure.
When we were kids, they never had ads during the Super Bowl. It was all like Tide and beer.
Yeah, totally. And, commercial speech and the First Amendment, it's always been an interesting balancing act that the Supreme Court has struck a very interesting balance around, obviously enabling First Amendment rights here, but then, of course, looking at whether the government has a substantial interest in regulating that and is the regulation appropriately tailored. So it really is a fascinating commercial speech question. And obviously for today, it's something that's permissible. But what do the supporters say about these ads?
Yeah. So supporters argue that advertising educates patients, it raises awareness of underdiagnosed conditions, and it helps prompt people to seek care. So with record dollars going towards pharma ads, lawmakers actually on both sides have been proposing restrictions or bans, which range from full ban to direct-to-consumer advertising to like narrow restrictions. There's one that would prohibit ads during the first 3 years after a drug receives FDA approval. And the idea behind this wait period is that early post-market safety and effectiveness data is really still emerging in those first few years. So why don't we see how the drug does without advertising before allowing the drug makers to amplify it? As you said, any sort of sweeping ban would face First Amendment challenges since commercial speech is protected.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm curious to see, where this evolves over time. And more importantly, that 2023 JAMA study that you cited seems a little bit a little bit not helpful here.
Yeah, I mean, even if it's true though, as can we really ban it? Like there are a lot of things that don't make healthcare better, that don't lower costs. Like advertising is just one thing, but then where do you draw the line?
Well, not to turn this into a Supreme Court precedent conversation, but as you know, with commercial speech, Halle, the courts have been very clear. The Supreme Court has been very clear that, one of the key aspects of regulation is, does the government have a substantial interest in regulating it? And I think the notions of both public health and drug safety easily satisfy that standard. And I think that's why pharma advertising is so regulated. So if more data comes out like that JAMA study, you wonder if it opens a door for the court to put further limits on that the regulators and ultimately the courts to approve further regulation on it. But
then couldn't you say the same for like advertising of e-cigarettes or alcohol?
Absolutely.
Where does it end?
Yeah, but it all falls under that commercial standard under the First Amendment. So very different than political speech, right? Which is very, very much a protected, receives almost full protection by the First Amendment, unlike commercial speech. So,
and commercial speech, is it literally like it's on behalf of a company? That's the definition of commercial speech.
Yeah, I think that's right. And pushing for or advocating on behalf of a particular product.
Yeah, interesting. But what if we're seeing more and more influencer marketing? What if can a pharma company pay an influencer? Like we saw Serena Williams at the Super Bowl. Like how does that play into this?
No, it's a good question. And look, the first stop, of course, is Congress and enacting a law. And so it'll be interesting to see if this influencer channel continues to have the great impact it clearly is having. And, does Congress decide to step in? And then, of course, litigation ensues and it'll make its way up ultimately to the Supreme Court. And the question is it commercial speech? And is there a substantial interest by the government in regulating it? And then finally, is that regulation really appropriately tailored to that interest? And so there are lots of interesting First Amendment questions that will arise, but certainly it starts with Congress and enacting a law to regulate it. So, speaking of hims and hers, as you noted, and speaking of Super Bowl ads, you might have seen, Halle, that Hims and Hers is continuing its international expansion. The company just announced it will acquire Australian digital health platform Eucalyptus for a purported $1.15 billion. This follows last year's acquisition of Zava, which gave Hims a foothold in the UK and the broader European market. Strategically, this seems to really be about global scale. Hims has been building, as we all know, this consumer-facing, vertically integrated telehealth and online pharmacy model. And this is an unusual model in our sector. So what's really fascinating is, as you know, Halle, is most healthcare delivery companies are really local, they're regional, they're at most national because of the regulation, the licensing, the reimbursement, and the clinical standards that vary state by state and country by country. And very few care delivery companies operate across multiple continents at scale. So this is to me, a really fascinating effort on Hims' part to go global.
Yeah. Yeah, it is really interesting. We don't have a precedent for this in digital health at all. Before you're building a company in Australia, in the UK, like people are gonna be like, what's your exit? Right? Like there's no market here. You have to go to the US. Well, maybe a US company could just buy you as part of their global strategy. So very interesting. I do want to point out that despite all of this expansion and the positive talk around it, Hims' stock is down 51% this year. And a major overhang is the Novo Nordisk lawsuit, which alleges that Hims has been selling unapproved compounded GLP-1 weight loss drugs that infringe on Novo's patents. And then last month it got worse with the FDA. You want to talk about what happened there?
Gosh, as many of our listeners know, FDA Commissioner McCary announced that they intend to take action against non-FDA approved compounded GLP-1 drugs from them being mass marketed as alternatives to branded products. And in that announcement, they specifically named Hims and Hers.
Can you imagine being the CEO and seeing like the FDA commissioner name your company? It's crazy.
It is definitely gonna shock the senses when you see that. And the next day, not surprisingly, Hims said that it would immediately stop selling its compounded version of the Wegovy oral weight loss pill. So clearly, that announcement, raised the attention here. It's a tough moment for these integrated telehealth models. But I think Hims' global strategy is going to be one to watch.
Yeah. Well, and just so our listeners who might be new to the space understand kind of the legal backdrop. So the FDA does allow what are called compounding pharmacies to produce customized versions of drugs in specific circumstances. And that includes when the drug is on the FDA's official shortage list, which was how all these companies started, all these GLP-1 prescribing platforms, including Hims, started to make and sell compounded versions of Ozempic because the branded supply was constrained. But today it's no longer constrained. And as you know, we saw Novo Nordisk just announced its oral weight loss product. It's going to be $149 per month. I think they're actually already selling it in the US. And it's not on the shortage list. So it was, a pretty bold move for Hims to continue to sell compounded versions of the injection, but now to also do it on the patented pill, particularly at scale with advertising at the Super Bowl, was pretty bold. And obviously it was not the right move, but I think Hims will still be okay.
Yeah, and just as a quick additional legal footnote to your comment earlier about compounding, compounded drugs do not actually undergo FDA review for safety or efficacy, which means that there's really no verified data on quality or outcomes for these copycats, if you will. So I think, again, the public interest certainly helped accelerate the FDA commissioner's announcement, and we'll see what happens with the patent lawsuit as well. So it's going to be an interesting moment for Hims, but I agree with you. They're going to be just fine.
Yep. All right. Well, keeping on our pharma kick, the biotech IPO is back for drug companies. Therapeutics, Eikon Therapeutics, Spyglass Pharma, and Veradermics all went public in early February, raising nearly $1 billion combined. And a fifth, Generate Biomedicine, filed to go public soon. This is very, very different from what you and I have seen over the past few years. Biotech peaked in 2021, like a lot of industries, but really struggled the last few years. And in fact, last year, a lot of people wrote off biotech, and we saw the lowest number of IPOs in 15 years. But things really seem to be turning around. And the real bellwether is Eikon Therapeutics. That's Eikon, not ICON. And it's led by the former head of R&D at Merck, name is Roger Perlmutter. And what they've built is really a platform company. So instead of advancing a single asset, a single drug, it's built an expensive central technology, in this case, high-end microscopy tools to discover multiple drugs. They've raised $1.1 billion over the last 6 years. And while the IPO price was still below its last private valuation, so it's technically a down round, it is still kind of considered an exciting movement. The other one, Generate Biomedicines, that's another interesting signal. They've invested a ton in an AI discovery drug platform. So the fact that Eikon and Generate are moving forward really shows that investors are opening the door to these platform-based biotech companies. So these are companies that look very different from biotech companies a decade ago, and not just these single asset stories.
Yeah, it is really, really exciting. And certainly here at Fenwick, we are seeing an uptick in biotech clients of ours, really digging in and exploring IPO opportunities here in 2026. It's no surprise, too, that many of these are being powered by AI. I mean, AI is everywhere, Halle. Seldom does an episode go by where we're not talking about it. That in GLP-1. So I guess we've now checked both both boxes for our listeners today. But
done. We can go home now.
Exactly. No, but it definitely feels that investors are becoming increasingly comfortable stepping back in, especially into companies like these where you've seen mature clinical pipelines and clear data milestones. So let's hope that it's a bellwether for a good 26 to come for the biotech sector.
And in a few weeks, you and I will both be at the New York Stock Exchange for Rock Health's annual CEO Summit. And we have not seen a digital health IPO this year, but I think we do have a few strong contenders. I think it is worth mentioning what is happening kind of outside of healthcare and the public markets, but the SaaS sector is really experiencing a significant downturn. And mainly their general investor fears that AI will replace employees, which means the per user seat-based pricing that's typical of SaaS companies will be impacted. Of course, there's fear that companies can just more easily build software themselves instead of needing to buy it through a vendor. We don't have Steve here, but his firm does the BVP NASDAQ Emerging Cloud Index, and that's a primary tracker for these high growth SaaS companies. And that's down 31% of the last 12 months. So it'll be interesting to see what happens broadly in digital health, given that biotech is actually doing better, but tech is actually doing worse. So where will healthcare come out on this?
The market is speaking, so it's definitely a tough time out there for traditional tech. But very few of those companies, Halle, in my just experience and interactions with those types of businesses, are not integrating AI very quickly into their solutions and platforms. Well, continuing on our theme around pharma, maybe we include this one in that bucket. So, saw an interesting article recently, Halle, on vaccine makers, curtailing research and cutting jobs. A new report actually indicates that vaccine makers are scaling back the research and cutting those jobs. Moderna, probably one of the more high-profile recent examples, is said to be reducing some late-stage infectious disease studies, laying off staff, and shelving programs targeting conditions such as herpes and Epstein-Barr. Epstein-Barr is the virus that may be linked to MS. Smaller biotechs are canceling manufacturing plans, or they're reducing headcount or pausing development. And as a result, venture funding for mRNA-focused companies also declined sharply last year. In fact, in 2023, venture funding for mRNA-focused companies was in the $510 million range, and it declined sharply in 2025 to $174 million of investment. So we're definitely seeing impact there in the venture community. At the same time, Halle, we've seen several federal contracts tied to mRNA technology also being canceled. Certain COVID vaccine uses have been narrowed, as we've seen in the press. And unfortunately, the childhood immunization schedule has been updated in ways that is causing parents to be quite anxious. The U.S. FDA further recently declined to review Moderna's mRNA flu vaccine, which would have been the first of its kind, over design study concerns. And then later revisited that decision after an updated application was submitted by Moderna. If approved, this could become the first mRNA-based flu vaccine in the United States. So it's really exciting technology. Meanwhile, vaccine uptake has been trending downward. Flu vaccine distribution is on pace for its lowest level in more than a decade, and COVID vaccine sales have fallen significantly to boot. So all of these contributing to just softer demand and more cautious investor sentiment.
Yeah.
What do you think, Halle?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I did see the Moderna, their flu vaccine getting their application getting rejected and then reversing it. And I think so much of this has to do with uncertainty. I'm curious, what you're hearing from folks in the space, how much is certainty bake into an investor's decision to invest or a company's decision to invest in a certain research area?
Yeah, I mean, uncertainty is, I wouldn't call it a death knell, but it's certainly a very, very significant headwind when these companies are out trying to raise capital or trying to get out on the public market. So when stability is in question, companies unfortunately slow investment, especially in areas that we need it, like infectious disease, where margins are already thinner than we see in oncology or specialty drugs. So uncertainty is just bad for our industry. And I think that's what I'm hearing from industry execs and investors across the landscape.
Yeah. I think the real impact is going to be that the investment just shifts elsewhere where there are clearer returns. And that just means that There are going to be fewer new vaccines advancing, less domestic manufacturing capacity, slower innovation and infectious disease preparedness. Just a public health nightmare. Speaking
just to put it in a note, in a short, concise note.
Public health nightmares, let me tell you about our next story, TrumpRx. No. So not all bad. I will say TrumpRx is not all bad. And I do appreciate the conversation, a bipartisan conversation that we can have around drug prices. And I very much support MFN, most favorable nation pricing for Americans, given that our tax dollars go to some of the early findings that make these drugs possible. So I'm very supportive of that. So the White House launched a new website called TrumpRx, which President Trump says will offer the lowest drug prices in the world for 43 brand name medications. Just note, there are medications that have generics. So it doesn't actually even matter the price of the brand name because we should probably just use generics for a lot of them. Anyhow, TrumpRx does not actually sell drugs despite the name. It displays the cash prices for these 43 brand name medications that they have negotiated directly with manufacturers under this MFN pricing approach, meaning our prices are aligned with what other wealthy countries pay. That's totally fair, totally cool. And then it tells patients kind of where they can purchase, what channels they can purchase these drugs through. The administration has framed this as a historic price reduction and a direct response to the criticism about high drug costs in the US that we all across the aisle have. But of course, our friends at Stat News, they did an analysis and they looked at more than 140 dosages and formulations listed on the TrumpRx website. And they compared them to the prices available through GoodRx and Mark Cuban's Cost Plus Drugs. Their finding was that for about half of the drugs on the site, cheaper generics were already available elsewhere. So you could actually end up paying more by going brand name because it doesn't show you the generic options. Which
it's not really, even on the website.
No,
you only
just
see the brand
name. Yeah.
Okay,
so what it could do is actually funnel more people to the, while it is maybe the best price for that brand name, sometimes generics are better. So what this study found was that in at least 18 cases, the consumers could save hundreds of dollars by choosing those generic versions instead of the brand name product listed. So an example, Pfizer's Protonix is listed on TrumpRx for about $200 for a 30-day supply, whereas a generic equivalent can cost as little as $6 through Mark Cuban's Cost Plus Drugs.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, anyways,
they don't help consumers to say, "Hey, go look at this other generic equivalent out there."
No, it just shows you the brand name prices, and also it may reduce the brand name prices relative to the list price, but it doesn't always represent the lowest available out-of-pocket option. I mean, drug pricing is so complex. But to be fair, there are examples where TrumpRx pricing is competitive. And specifically, I'm excited about this, specifically for certain fertility drugs. They do appear to be cheaper on TrumpRx than other cash pay platforms. And most patients in fertility are paying out of pocket. Very few health plans actually cover it. So there, I do think that we're seeing something that is favorable for patients. The only other thing I will add to this is that there's some criticism around transparency. TrumpRx includes a disclaimer encouraging insured patients to check their coverage first, but there's no parallel warning highlighting that generics might be dramatically cheaper. So hopefully they'll add this so that people can see that there are options beyond the brand name, but it's new. So hopefully things will be ironed out and improved, and hopefully they'll hear the criticisms and make changes for the better.
So I have a silly, naive question, Halle, here.
Sure.
So can you take the TrumpRx price and combine it with a GoodRx coupon and go lower?
No.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
Yeah, no.
Wishful thinking on my part.
I know. No, these are direct negotiations with the pharma companies. So it's like you take this deal here or that deal there. So you're not on a lot of medications, are you?
Well, I do have, I'm on a statin. I take a generic version of Crestor, for example. And so I do find, that I don't need Crestor. The generic has been great for me over the last year or two. And, my biomarker data suggests it's working. So if it ain't broke,
great. Yes. No, stick with it.
I don't need to stick. I don't need to change. Yeah. But all right. Well, let's get into the final story. One of my favorite topics. I wouldn't say we're still on the pharma theme, but let's just say maybe. As you know, Halle, I'm very, very bullish on longevity. And this story takes it to the next level. You may have seen that Bryan Johnson wants $1 million per year to share his longevity secrets. $1 million, Halle. Now, I did in this article note that it's only going to be available to 3 participants. So apparently applications are flying in to be one of the lucky 3 in a new program that Bryan has announced called Immortals, where you pay $1 million per year to follow his exact anti-aging protocol. He says it replicates the regimen he's followed for 5 years under his Blueprint brand, including continuous biological tracking, concierge medical oversight, advanced skin and hair interventions, access to experimental therapies, we'll get to that in a sec, and 24/7 access to something he calls Bryan AI. I know, take that all in. $1 million for this entire protocol. As many listeners know, Bryan has reportedly spent over $2 million a year on his own body. He's turned his labs, supplements, scans, and biomarker data into content, building one of the most visible personal brands in the longevity ecosystem. So, Halle, what do you think?
I think this is a marketing gimmick. He really likes to be a controversial figure. Like, he just seems to feed off that. Like when he very publicly did a plasma transfusion from his teenage son. But, the pushback beyond the insane price. Okay, step back. How much would you pay for this?
I mean, $1 million is crazy. I don't have $1 million lying around to invest in this.
No,
the concern around some of the ethics, of course, as well as the clinical, verification or validation, maybe that's the right word, of some of these protocols. So
there's
I don't know,
evidence.
my friend.
He has not published his protocol in any peer-reviewed journals. And many of the biological age claims that he uses, they rely on epigenetic clocks and biomarker panels that are still debated in terms of predicted validity. So, epigenetic age can move with kind of short-term lifestyle changes, but whether that translates into actual lifespan extension really remains very unproven. So I'm fascinated to see how long this guy really lives, and was all this time being obsessed with living more worth it? I don't know. He's full time focused on adding years to his life versus just living his life.
Yeah, and that whole health span debate, right, versus lifespan, it's fascinating because we all want to live longer, but we want to do it in a healthy way that we're enjoying life, and that old phrase, moderation, right, is really is probably the key, like anything in life. But my real concern here is the longevity, and you and I have talked about this for many, many years. It's really increasingly becoming a luxury good. Wealth, unfortunately, in our country, already correlates with longer life expectancy than those with lesser means. And I wonder if, and it's TBD, if programs like this raise the question of whether biological optimization itself becomes stratified by income.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Look, I think a lot of downstream benefits can come if we can clinically validate some of these protocols and then find more cost-effective ways. As you know, Halle, we just had Zeke Emanuel on the show talking about his new book, and we know that the core evidence-backed and based longevity drivers are still exercise, sleep, metabolic health, and those aren't necessarily going to run you $1 million a year.
Hopefully not.
But unfortunately today at this point, and there is a bit of the frontier, and I want to give Bryan credit for raising the awareness of some of these important steps. But today, concierge precision programs are still not generally affordable. I'm really excited about the power of AI. I can't wait to learn more about Bryan AI and what it's going to bring. But I know a number of exciting companies that are trying to bring evidence-based AI to really try to bring some rigor and structure to a lot of the questions we're all grappling with as patient users.
Yeah. I'm more of a Zeke Emanuel, Eric Topol camp of there are things that you can do to live as healthy as possible, but going to the extreme and obsessing over it doesn't feel healthy in the first place. And there's some like ego in it, right? Like needing to like live as long as possible. Like I get wanting to live to see your kids and your grandkids and wanting to be healthy, but like the obsession with it feels very unhealthy. So I don't know, not my thing.
Yeah, and look, for many of us, I lost my parents, both of them way too young, and so I'm really committed to trying to find within reason ways to improve my health trajectory, and so I'm there with you, and I think first just collecting the data, Halle, to me has been so powerful. Learning more about my body, whether it's through the Oura Ring or the 8 Sleep or the biomarker data that I get quarterly, it really is a powerful motivator to try to understand more about who I am as a person, biologically speaking.
So with that, Michael, happy March. Spring
Happy
is almost
March.
here. I will
Yes.
see you in New York. And yeah, have a good rest of your month.
Talk soon, everybody.
Thanks for listening to The Heart of Healthcare. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to support the podcast, please leave a rating and review, and don't forget to subscribe. The Heart of Healthcare is produced by Halle Tecco and hosted by Michael Esquivel, Steve Krause, and Halle Tecco. The show is engineered, edited, and mixed by Kyle Moore. Visit our website, heartofhealthcarepodcast.com, for show notes and details.